Welcome back, y'all. We are back this week with another Golden Record track breakdown, and today we're starting the week off talking about love. Now, this is our second poetry track off of the album, and it's a really great example of how you can take a bunch of uncomplicated instrumental tracks, layer them on top of each other, and end up with a really interesting soundscape. So let's dive into this shit.
So before we look at anything too specifically, I want to show y'all something generally about each of these instrumental tracks. Now, as we open up everything, you'll notice that most of these are playing single notes falling on simple rhythmic patterns. Even as we move out of the accents and more into our melodics, the vox, the piano, the kalimba, the organ, nothing's doing anything too complicated. This is a simple chord progression. Even our hi-hats don't have too much going on in there. There's no rolls or anything really dramatic happening in each one of these. And our main drum is following a very simple pattern the entire time. Now, the reason I wanted to show y'all that, even up here with our bass lines and chords and everything, is to really enforce this idea that some people feel like they really have to have super complicated instrumentals to make an exciting or an in-depth track that is interesting to the listener. And that's not really the case, especially in a track like this where a lot of what I really want the focus to be on is the words and the poetry. I don't need the instrumentation to be too complicated to be taking away from all of that. So now with that said, let's go ahead and start diving into some of these individual tracks. So starting with Love, I knew a couple of things right off the bat. It's a poetry track, so the words needed to be the star. It's about love, so it needs to have a sense of warmth and mystique to it. And it needs to feel like it's affecting you deep inside of yourself. So, in Fear, if y'all remember, when Louis says love for the first time, there's a deep bass rumble that accompanies it. And so with that, I have my starting place. And that's what led me to this chord progression. So these chords here, the very first ones that you hear, it's a simple, but it's got a deep, rumbly quality to it that really dragged me in, and I was like, okay, cool, I like that. And so as soon as I had those chords, the next thing to do was to chop up the poem to match that. So let's listen to these things together.
Love must be some kind of madness. It defies all logic and reason. It will cause you to do things you never thought you were capable of doing. Things that people might deem insane, such as...
You hear how they play in and out of each other and they work with each other really well. So then once we had that chord progression, then it was adding in, we needed some of that mystique that we were talking about earlier, which led us to these two pads. Now, like we had mentioned earlier at the top of the video, nothing in here is playing a very complicated part. It's all just about layering them together. So you hear this first pad, and the second one, both of them, nothing too loud. It's just, again, it's a presence. Hear them, and then you can listen to them together, how they interact with each other. Hear how one ends and the other picks it up. Almost like a conversation. So then, okay, we had some of our mystique. Now we need to add bass. So that takes us to our big rumbly bass. Now again, as I was talking about, we had that jumping off point with Fear, so I knew it needed to be something big and impactful. And therefore, we ended up with this. Big, deep rumble bass. You can feel it in your bones. And even the second bass in the track, which is more of a classic kind of Rickenbacker bass, still has a lot of that big low-end presence. It might help if I solo it so you can actually hear that big low-end presence. Ooh, yeah. Hear that? Oh, yeah, it's big. Just a big old bass. And so we have our basses, we have our pads, we have our chords. Now we need something in the percussion world to start really bringing this all together. And of course, you start off with your drums. Now again, I didn't want this to be a very complicated instrumental track. I needed the poetry to really stand out and stand on its own, which is why in the drums in our main section, all we have is a couple of cymbals and then a big old snare hit. So I'll let you listen to that real quick. It's got some delay on it, obviously, and a bit of EQ. But that's all the drums are really doing the whole time. We do have a couple other drum elements. I'll let you listen to those real quick. Still not too complicated. And like I said, even our hi-hats aren't doing anything too crazy. There's a little run. See, I mean, that's it. There's really not too much happening in there. So I'll let you listen to all of our drum section all together. Like I said, it's not too complicated, but it's impactful, and it really lets the poetry stand out and do its thing. Now, we do have some other little melodic pieces up here that I want to talk about before we move into some of our textures. We have this second chord progression. It's doing a very similar thing to what our top ones are, so we'll just refresh you one more time with the top chords. Cool. Now, the second ones, see that? Same notes. It's just serving a different tonal purpose. Even with these third chords that come in about later in the song, you can hear them. Hear that, how close they are to the second ones? But it's when you have these layered sounds all together that it really starts to create some really interesting tones. So we're just going to listen to the poem with these chords and some of our pads that we were talking about, and then our drums and bass as well. We won't add in any of our textures yet, or any of these organs or kalimbas or things, because I want y'all just to really hear how each of these layers building upon each other make this track more and more interesting. So let's just go listen to all of this together.
Start a fire in a church where your true love was wed to another. Or climb a mountain while naked to scream your true love's name at the universe. Or lose your faculties while giving yourself utterly to writing a symphony that your love slept through while listening, even though the writing of it was fueled by undiluted love.
So something Louie and I had talked about with the performance of this piece was we kind of wanted that idea of when you're tripping over your tongue and the words are just spilling out, almost a word vomit when you confess your love to someone and you can't really stop yourself until everything that you have had to say has been said. And there's always that moment maybe about halfway through where you realize that if you keep talking, there's no way for them to respond, and so maybe you just keep talking because it's better than no response is better than a negative one. So we really wanted to impart some of that, which is why a lot of the thoughts in the poem just go one into the other, into the other, into the other, is that constant flow state, and it doesn't really slow down and really finish the big impactful thing that it's trying to say until the very end, when there's sort of a moment and a time to finally slow down a bit and collect your thoughts. So you've heard how all of those intertwined with each other. Now let's talk about a few more of our melodic things and our accents as well. So we have this organ, a kalimba, a piano, the soft piano from Labs that we've talked about before, and of course these vocal effects that are going on in here. So we'll just open up all of these so you can sort of see them a bit clearer. Now, again, nothing is too complicated with these parts. You have the organ laying down just a very classic chord progression. Follows the same chords as our chords up here. Really nice sound in that. We've got some cool things happening with the RC20 before we flatten that out to have some warble and cool artifacts in there. Now the kalimba, again, you can see here just by looking at the waveform that it's only following on our third beat in each of these bars. And that, again, it doesn't need to do a lot because it's creating the interest in just its scarcity almost. So we'll listen to the organ and the kalimba together so you can hear what they sound like. The kalimba, you know, is just real simple, but it's got this lovely tone to it that really cuts through some of the other frequencies in the track and gives you some air up in your higher frequencies. Let's hear that. It's just gorgeous. I love its sound. You can hear that there's some artifacts, a bit of hiss and noise in there to add some of that lo-fi-ness. As we talked about in some tracks, I don't always want that, so I don't always have that on. But because we were in Love, heading into 32nd Street, which really has its roots in lo-fi hip-hop, I needed some of that in here just to thematically lean into the other. There's a lot of that happens in this album. We start one idea in one track to finish it in another one. Then that leaves us with our Vox. Let's listen to it before we move to the piano. And this is literally, it only appears twice in the entire song. It's the same sample each time, but it's when it comes in when he starts talking about God, and so it adds a bit of this etherealness, a bit of otherworldliness to it. You can hear it come in.
With life, with one another, with our families and friends, with our soulmate, with our loved ones, with God. Is that what it means? Is that what we are missing? Are we missing that part? Maybe that is the cure for all human suffering. That we must all go mad with love and...
So it's really, it's talking about humanity and sort of our big, like, existential crises type questions. And so I just needed some of that flavor in there to help hit that home a little further. And then, of course, we have our piano. Now, the piano is playing a very classic kind of melody. You'll hear this. Mostly relying on the chords themselves with a few accent notes. Now I've taken that melody that we have here and then I just bring it in at the top and the very end of the track with the soft piano just to kind of hint at this, that there's something coming further down the line. So we'll get a little taste of that with this. And that's just the lead part. You can hear the chords from the piano that are being played in this section as well. That's been taken out. See, I took those chords away for the soft piano. Just to kind of introduce the melody of love that is present throughout and through the end earlier in the top of the track. It's all about themes and leitmotifs, as it were, things like Wagner, or even the stuff that Howard Shore did in the Lord of the Rings music. He did a lot of work with leitmotifs and this idea of introducing ideas and themes for characters and even ideas as opposed to like a theme for an idea or a theme for a feeling as opposed to a certain character's theme. And so this is kind of our theme for love that you hear at the very beginning, and then it comes in again with the chords and the soft piano layered on top of each other at the end. You can hear what these two sound like together. It just really rounds out the sound for a nice full quality to it. Now, the last little bit that we need to discuss are all of these accents. We talked a little bit about them in that first opening section, but I just want you to hear what they sound like a little bit. You hear how they're all, nothing is too complicated in here. Single notes falling on basically just little beats here and there. But when all of them come together, they create quite a nice atmospheric quality. How each one of these picks up where one is starting to die off, so there's never like a full dropout of the sound in these accents. And then the last little bit is our traffic in here. This is our glue. This is what brings us out of one song and into the other. So we had traffic in $3 Wells, as we were talking about. This is the same traffic from that. And then this traffic over here is the same traffic that you will hear at the top of 32nd Street. And like I said, it's just some glue to help us transition smoothly from one into the other as seamlessly as possible. And that ending with all of these things together and that final traffic sounds kind of like this.
Fuck sanity. Go absolutely insane with love.
all of our other instrumental goes away, that piano slowly fades out, and then that's where 32nd Street would start.
So that was our second poetry track off of the album called Love. Really great example of how you can take some interesting textures that aren't too complicated, stack them on top of each other, and end up with a really unique soundscape for your track. Now next time we're going to be talking about one of my favorite tracks off of the album, 32nd Street. It's a real jazzy lo-fi time. I cannot wait to dive into it more with y'all. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I'll see you on the next one.
Fuck sanity. Go absolutely insane with love.